Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower recalled, "The battlefield at Falaise was unquestionably one of the greatest killing fields of any of the war areas. 48 hours after the closing of the gap, I was conducted through it on foot to encounter scenes that could only be described by Dante. It was literally possible to walk for hundreds of yards at a time, stepping on nothing but dead and decaying flesh." Royal Air Force Liaison Officer and Group Captain Desmond Scott similarly noted, "The roads were choked with wreckage and the swollen bodies of men and horses. Bits of uniform were plastered to shattered tanks and trucks, and human remains hung in grotesque shapes on the blackened hedgerows. Strangely enough, it was the shape of the horses that upset me most. Harnessed as they were, it had been impossible for them to escape, and they lay dead in tangled heaps, their large, wide eyes crying out to me in anguish. Some of the enemy did manage to escape, but not unscathed. Lieutenant Walter Kruger, a signals officer retreating with the 12th SS Panzer Division, was struck by shrapnel as his truck slowly crept along the Falaise road, making it an inviting target for Allied artillery and fighter bombers. Then I saw that the whole column was on fire," he said. "Everybody was running." This was the slaughter within the Falaise Pocket. It began with the German army's thrust to the west toward Avranches in early August 1944 that surely ranks as one of the most ill-conceived military moves of all time. Many analysts agree that Hitler should have pulled his formations in France back toward the German border in an orderly fashion, rather than shoving them forward toward Mortain to create a salient where they could be isolated, surrounded, and chopped to pieces, which is exactly what happened in the Falaise Pocket.
But by the summer of 1944, Hitler's previously astute military mind had deteriorated. The man who once considered himself a military genius, on par with Napoleon and far superior to any of his generals or field marshals, now saw his armies crumbling in the east, in the west, and in the south. How did the Allies, after almost 9 weeks of desperate combat in the Normandy hedgerows, or before the tenacious Nazi defenses at Caen, find themselves poised to inflict a devastating and final blow on the reeling German forces in Normandy, an attack that ended on August 21, 1944? And how was that final blow missed, with so many Germans allowed to escape to fight another day? Operation Cobra initiated the American breakout from the Normandy hedgerows on July 25th, resulting in the start of a fluid offensive with the capture of Avranches 5 days later. The British and Canadian forces of British Field Marshal Bernard L. Montgomery's 21st Army Group eventually took Caen on July 9th. However, the southern part of the city and the entrance to the Falaise Plain were still under German control, despite attacks by Montgomery's forces throughout the entire month of July. On August 1st, Lieutenant General George S. Patton's Third Army became operational, was brought to France, and attacked through the Avranches Gap into Brittany and southward toward the River Loire. 2 days later, on August 3rd, Hitler ordered Field Marshal Günther von Kluge, the Commander-in-Chief West, as well as Army Group B commander after Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was wounded on July 17th and sent back to Germany, to launch a counterattack against Patton's army. Kluge had a formidable force at his disposal, including the German 7th Army commanded by SS Obergruppenführer Paul Hauser, while the 5th Panzer Army, with hundreds of tanks, was led by General Heinrich Eberbach. Kluge planned to mount a heavy, single-pronged counterattack, Operation Lüttich, against Patton's army with at least 4 panzer divisions comprising SS Obergruppenführer Willy Bittrich's 2nd SS Panzer Corps. This counterattack began east of Mortain and drove westward toward Avranches in an attempt to envelop Patton's forces and establish Avranches as the western flank anchor for a new continuous defensive line. Hitler conceived this attack as a springboard that would then thrust German armored forces northward into the rear of General Courtney Hodge's U.S. First Army and, according to Hitler, drive them into the sea. According to Hitler, the decision in the Battle of France depends on the success of the Avranches attack. He has a unique opportunity, which will never return, to drive into an extremely exposed enemy area and thereby to change the situation completely. The Führer further reasoned that this offensive would cut off Patton's Third Army from its logistical tail, allowing the Wehrmacht to crush the anticipated encircled forces to the south.
What became known as the Battle of the Falaise Pocket was a true example of the Allies fighting as a coalition. Apart from the initial landings at the 5 Normandy beaches on June 6th, this final phase of the conflict in Normandy most closely brought American, British, Canadian, Polish, and Free French soldiers together in operational terms. The Canadian First Army, commanded by Lieutenant General Henry D.G. Crerar, would play a major role in the upcoming battle. Crerar had led the Canadian First Corps in Italy in the late winter of 1943 to 1944, before taking over as commander of the Canadian First Army. Subordinate to him was Lieutenant General Guy G. Simonds, commander of the Canadian Second Corps, composed of the 2nd and 3rd Canadian Infantry Divisions, and the inexperienced Canadian 4th Armoured Division, commanded by Major General George Kitching, along with the 2nd Canadian Armoured Brigade. Additionally, Simonds would be in charge of 2 units on loan from British First Corps to reinforce the Canadians, the 51st Highland Infantry Division and the 33rd British Armoured Brigade. Finally, Simonds would count within his corps the 1st Polish Armoured Division under Major General Stanislaw Maciek. About 24,000 Polish soldiers reached Great Britain in mid-1940. They were soon reinforced by volunteers from Polish expatriate communities worldwide. Maciek was an experienced soldier, having served during both World War I and the Polish-Soviet conflict of 1918 to 1920. But he had no experience in armored warfare when he took over the 1st Polish Armored Division. These foreign fighters were reorganized into the 1st Polish Corps and based in Scotland. Initially, the 1st Polish Armored Division consisted of 2 armored brigades, each with 6 tank battalions, comprising the 10th Motorized Cavalry Brigade and the 16th Armored Brigade, along with a motorized infantry battalion taken from the independent Highland Rifle Brigade. This unit, after reconnaissance and normal divisional administrative components were added, was ready for collective inter-unit battle training in early 1943 in eastern England.
However, after readjusting its unit's composition to adhere to Britain's new structure for armored divisions, the 1st Polish Armored Division had only 1 armored brigade, with an infantry brigade serving as its other major combat component, with a total complement of 885 officers and about 15,000 other ranks. This division was made up of the 10th Armored Cavalry Brigade, the 1st, 2nd, and 24th Lancers Armored Battalions, and the 10th Dragoons, a mechanized infantry battalion. The infantry brigade, the 3rd Rifle Brigade in this division, was comprised of the Highland Podolon Rifles and the 8th and 9th Rifle Battalions. The 10th Mounted Rifle Battalion was to serve as the reconnaissance unit for the division. The Armored Division possessed 350 tanks, 48 artillery howitzers, 48 medium and heavy anti-tank guns, and 54 medium anti-aircraft guns. Although the division did not participate in the Normandy landings, elements of it began landing in France on July 30th, eager to engage the Nazis after a 4-year interval of migration, refitting, and training. The Poles were eager to pay back the Germans for ravaging their country. Their wish would soon become reality during Operation Totalize. Simonds' 2nd Canadian Corps was about to launch from the eastern portion of the Normandy Lodgement toward Falaise to the south against Cluj's armored divisions. On August 6th, Montgomery pressed his 21st Army Group commanders in the field south of Caen to push for Falaise. The next day, Operation Totalize was launched by Simonds' 2nd Corps after a heavy aerial bombing of German defenses south of Caen beginning at 11 p.m. on August 7th. Simonds' 600 tanks advanced down both sides of the Caen-Falaise road toward Falaise, 15 miles away. The timing of the Canadian attack was accidental as it related to the Mortain counterattack, coming 24 hours after the unexpected German westward attack toward Avranches. The Canadian effort, in preparation for almost a week, had been launched in an entirely different context, with Montgomery focusing on trapping the Germans west of the Seine River.
For Totalize, Simonds implemented some innovations in his tactical repertoire since previous British attacks, notably Operation Goodwood down the Caen-Falaise road, had been
been stopped by heavy German anti-tank fire once British armored forces were in the open countryside. Simmons' offensive would be launched at night and without a preparatory artillery barrage to conceal his movement. It was Simmons' expectation that tanks and mobile infantry would breach the initial German defense line, leaving the marching infantry to mop up any enemy pockets that were bypassed in the armored assault. Finally, Simmons would employ RAF night bombers to lay a carpet of bombs along the battlefield's flanks and front on the night of the attack, with American heavy and medium strategic bombers repeating the tactic in the breakout phase. From August 8th to 14th, the U.S. 9 Tactical Air Command flew over 4,000 sorties into the pocket, while their British counterparts flew 1,500. On several occasions, the Allied fighter bombers over the pocket were almost competing for airspace. The aerial assault of more than 1,000 RAF Bomber Command aircraft targeted the area between Maille-sur-Orne and Fontenay-le-Marmion on the right or western flank, and La Hogue and Mar-de-Magne to the left or eastern flank. Facing Simmons' attack was the 89th Infantry Division, which was shattered by the aerial bombardment. The 51st Highland Division, supported by the 33rd British Armoured Brigade, took La Hogue, Tilly-la-Campagne, and Sequeville-les-Campagnes on the left flank. On the right flank, the French villages had likewise been taken by midday on August 8th, with 2 Canadian Corps' new tactics. However, on that day, an American 8th Air Force bomber attack accidentally hit Canadian, British, and Polish troops, causing more than 300 casualties. As the Allies began to move forward again, German Tiger tanks and 88mm anti-tank anti-aircraft guns of Standartenführer Kurt Meyer's 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend took their toll on Allied armor. Terrific tank versus tank battles occurred on August 8th, but Simmons' 2 Corps had reached a standstill and could not penetrate German defenses farther in its southward advance toward Falaise. The Polish 2nd Armored Battalion of the 10th Armored Cavalry Brigade lost about 2/3 of its M4 Sherman tanks during the German attack.
The 24th Polish Lancers Armored Battalion also incurred heavy tank losses to German artillery and Tiger tank fire. By the end of the day, the Canadians and Poles had created about a 6-mile salient, but had been stopped by German firepower more than 12 miles north of Falaise. During the night of August 8-9, elements of SS Obergruppenführer Joseph Sepp Dietrich's 1 SS Panzer Corps, along with some survivors from the previously bombed German 89th Infantry Division, reinforced a partially built new defensive line to the east of the Caen-Falaise Road. Other infantry units from the German 85th Division also started to arrive from the German 15th Army. During the early hours of August 9, the Canadians and Poles again commenced a nighttime assault, but it failed when Canadian armor and infantry from the 28th Armored and Algonquin regiments, respectively, got in the Poles' way and arrived at Point 140, the Polish objective. As a result of Canadian forces being in accidental proximity to a new German line under construction, Meyer unleashed his 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend and assorted units of SS and Wehrmacht infantry, which forced the Canadians to withdraw after losing about 50 tanks and suffering more than 200 casualties. Although Meyer's panzer force was severely depleted of armored vehicles after the fighting at Caen, it was still capable of fielding more than 100 88mm and 75mm anti-tank guns, which halted the renewed Canadian advance at dawn on August 9th and stopped the Polish armor from advancing into the villages in the vicinity of the new German line. Meyer's tanks and anti-tank guns were effective at countering every Canadian armored thrust that day. Simon's approximately 600 tanks at the start of Operation Totalize, among his 2 untested armored divisions, had failed to breach this new German defensive line, which had only 35 panzers of all types by August 10th. Simon's halted Totalize and defended his gains with his infantry divisions, while the Canadian, British, and Polish armor was pulled back to await new orders. Simon's believed that a lack of drive and the inexperience of his 2 armored divisions were the most decisive factors in explaining the operation's failure. Despite the tenacity of the Germans in their defensive posture, Totalize did, however, maul the Wehrmacht and SS formations, leaving their positions critically weakened.
When Operation Totalize ended on August 11th, the 2 Canadian Corps had advanced almost 9 miles toward its objective of Falaise, but was still bogged down several miles north of the town in the Caen-Falaise corridor. On the 11th, Montgomery issued a new directive to close the narrowing gap that the Germans were attempting to exploit in the area between Falaise and Argentan. He ordered Carrard to move his 1st Canadian Army south and link up with the advancing Americans to ensnare as many Germans as possible. This became Operation Tractable. For Tractable, during which Simons was to make his thrust down the N158, the Caen-Falaise road, a series of feints were conducted to the west of the road on August 12th and 13th. However, these failed when the plans for the movements were discovered by the Germans on the body of a dead Canadian officer. On the night of August 12th-13th, Falaise was heavily bombed by Allied planes and completely flattened. The next day, Montgomery was still optimistic that Carrard's forces could move swiftly through Falaise to Argentan. The cause for Montgomery's optimism was somewhat specious since he believed that Carrard's army had performed poorly. However, no attempts were made to alter the plan or the Anglo, Canadian, and Polish forces involved. Nonetheless, Montgomery stated, "If we can close the gap completely, we shall have put the enemy in the most awkward predicament." Thus, the prospect of a quicker encirclement in the Falaise-Argentan area caused the Allies to suspend Montgomery's drive for the Seine. However, Monty still held out the possibility of a wider encirclement of German forces towards the Seine should the Germans continue to attempt to escape eastward. Kluge's Operation Lutich, which had begun on August 7th, made some significant initial gains against Major General J. Lawton Collins' 7th Corps on the U.S. First Army front. Morton was overrun, but the German defensive was halted later on its first day by stiff American resistance from Major General Leland H. Hobbs' 30th Infantry Division, defending the important heights of Hill 317 to the south of Morton, and by tactical air support.
Further German attacks over the next few days failed to give Hitler his desired breakthrough. Hitler intensified this flawed westward movement when he dismissed Kluge's plea for an orderly eastward withdrawal and ordered Eberbach to take command of an ad hoc formation, Panzergruppe Eberbach, with the Führer's order to drive to the southwest and then to move northwestward to the sea. 5th Panzer Army would be turned over to Dietrich. Eventually, the Panzer forces were driven back. With the failure of Operation Lutich to capture Avranches, Lieutenant General Omar N. Bradley, commander of the U.S. 12th Army Group, saw that Hitler had exposed his whole broad flank to attack an encirclement from the south and recognized this as an opportunity to decimate a large percentage of the German 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army in Normandy. Bradley, concluding that Kluge had committed strategic suicide, said, "This is an opportunity that comes to a commander not more than once in a century. We're about to destroy an entire hostile army and go all the way from here to the German border." On maps, it appeared that the Germans were trying to head eastward through the 13-mile gap between Falaise and Argentan. If 15th Corps now moved northward through Le Mans through Alençon, Bradley saw, the German 7th and 5th Panzer armies would be trapped as long as Crayer's 1st Canadian First Army could continue its southward movement into Falaise first and then Argentan, thereby forming the northern jaw of the pincer strategy. Concurrent with this move, American forces not committed to the clearing of Brittany would move northward toward Falaise, thus completing the envelopment of the Germans. As Bradley concentrated American forces near Mortain to maintain possession of Avranches, he conceived an envelopment that would trap the bulk of Kluge's armies in eastern Normandy. On August 8th, Bradley discussed with Eisenhower the opportunity offered by the Germans' Mortain counterattack. Bradley was in favor of implementing the simpler tactic of turning Hyslop's 15th Corps north from Le Mans, instead of heading eastward for the Seine to start the larger envelopment that Montgomery favored. Bradley wanted a shallower and surer movement aimed at the exposed German flank that had moved east to attack Mortain. With this shorter envelopment, once the Canadians reached Falaise and then continued southeast to Argentan, the meeting of the Allies would cut off the escape route of an estimated 21 German divisions. Bradley and Eisenhower's presence notified Montgomery to secure his approval for a change in plan. Bradley proposed that 15th Corps pivot north from Le Mans toward Alençon, where U.S. infantry and armor would threaten the flank of Kluge's counterattacking forces and also form the southern jaw of the proposed pincer strategy and finish off the majority of the German army in France. It was an audacious, heady possibility, and Monty agreed. Haislip's 15th Corps, composed of the U.S. 5th Armored Division, the 79th and 90th Infantry Divisions, and Major General Jacques Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division, took Le Mans on August 9th, and the following day jumped off to the north to begin the pincer movement against the Germans. The area within which Kluge's German forces would be encircled would be known as the Falaise Pocket. Opposing Haislip's move against Alençon were elements of 2 German divisions, the 708th Infantry and 9th Panzer. However, one of 9th Panzer's Panther tank battalions had temporarily been sent to support the defense of Falaise, and the 708th Infantry Division was not at full strength, having been previously mauled by the US 90th Infantry Division. Due to the fluidity of the battlefield as a result of the Germans' failed Mortain counterattack, Montgomery analyzed on August 11th the consequences of the anticipated juncture of the American and Canadian Polish forces. He came to the conclusion that Kluge would mass stronger German forces to defend Alençon rather than Falaise. Extending this line of reasoning, Montgomery believed that Simon's 2nd Canadian Corps would make speedier progress and reach Argenton from the north before 15th Corps could arrive from the south. Therefore, Montgomery ordered Simons to continue his efforts to take Falaise and then head for Argenton. Montgomery had drawn a boundary line that separated the zones of operation of Bradley's American 12th Army Group and his own 21st Army Group. This meant that 15th Corps was to advance through Alençon and go no further north than the Army Group boundary just south of Argenton. Historian Martin Blumenson said, he projected a meeting of Canadian and American forces just south of Argenton, which would form a literal encirclement of the Germans. The British Second Army and the First U.S. Army, pressing from the west, were to herd the Germans into the Canadian-American line and assist in the total destruction of the surrounded enemy. Should the Germans somehow evade encirclement in Argenton, Montgomery was ready with an alternate plan. The Allies were to reinstate the drive earlier projected to the Seine. Therefore, as of August 11th, Montgomery's strategic thinking had also involved a larger, more westward envelopment at the River Seine.